Well, surprise, surprise, given the fact that yesterday we've had the announcement that IndyRef 2 is now going to happen. Once again, Brexit, What the Hell Happens Now by Ian Dunt once again predicts the future. If you do not have this book already, go and buy this book, because this has pretty much predicted the future. Dangerously and unsettlingly so. Why? Well, as it says on the cover, for people who still believe in experts. So, we shall begin with the chapter on Scotland, how to keep the UK together. Most of Britain's difficulties are based on its desire to maintain the financial benefits of the European Union while extracting itself from the ensuring shared of sovereignty, but there is an aspect to the British dilemma outside of that trade-off, keeping the United Kingdom together. Scotland and Northern Ireland voted 62% and 55% representatively to stay in the EU. It is unclear whether the UK's current constitutional arrangements can survive contact with the EU machine. So this is the part about Scotland. On the morning of June 24th, when David Cameron resigning, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove looked shocked to discover that they might be in charge, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon seemed to be one of the few political leaders in Britain to have any composure. Brexit felt like it might be a defining chapter in the story of how Scotland left the UK. The socio-political chasm between the two countries has never seemed bigger. And the worst of all, the chief negotiator, Guy Vanderstaat, soon started making promising noises about Scottish membership of the EU. But the undercurrents are not as positive for independence as the members of the Scottish National Party might think. Its leader appears unassailable, but Nicola Sturgeon is actually in a tough position. For a start, the polling is unhelpful. The number of people who said they would vote for independence in a second referendum following the Brexit vote is largely unchanged from the 44% who voted for independence in 2014. Asking Scottish voters to choose between the European single market and the British single market is also fraught with risk. The British single market is worth 4 times as much as in terms for jobs and trade for Scotland, and Westminster helps plug the gap in Scotland's 15 billion annual deficit. The EU isn't directly transferring funds or anything like that magnitude. Looking at the stark figures like that, it's hard to imagine an electorate making a different choice to the one they made last time. Even politically, the debate over Brexit is not as neat as Sturgeon rhetoric would imply. Around half a million SNP voters voted to leave and get out of the EU. Sturgeon faces bad polling on one side and terrible economic argument on the other. She's under severe political pressure to make promises on a second referendum, especially now that she can argue that there has been a material change in Scotland's circumstances, which would warrant another vote, which is what exactly we've seen today. And yeah, we're not going to read because it literally just says exactly what has happened, ironically. It predicted that Scotland would make another vote, but it goes on to say that, look, if Scotland stays, the Sturgeon would be given larger mandates for fishing and agricultural policies within Scotland. So if Scotland stays, not only do they get larger devolution powers, but if they leave, they've now got a £15 million deficit to take on, and the EU is not going to give those funds. They transfer nothing in the sort of like, not to mention the cost of, the annual fee that Scotland would have to pay. Scotland is just not economically viable by itself as a single country, and even in that case, as the book's just said, let me just read it again. Asking voters to choose between the European single market and the British single market is also fraught with risk. The British single market is worth 4 times as much in terms of jobs and trade for Scotland. And, you know, Westminster helps plug the gap in Scotland's 15 billion annual deficit. The EU isn't directly transferring funds or anything like that magnitude. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Brexit, what the hell happens now, predicting the future unsettlingly yet again.